Welcome back to Worth Innovating News. This week, 2 dev servers opened and a lot of data mining. Hit the subscribe button because we got a lot to go over. Now let's start off with the new thing in the room, helicopters. From my estimations of messing around with them and trying to take them to a match, I don't think they're actually going to change the meta. They're going to be 2 things, either completely useless or really annoying. The 2 ways that you can kill a tank in a helicopter are either by being lucky and shooting a lot of rockets at it, or using ATGMs from miles away. Now even if you do use ATGMs from miles away, it leaves you open to counter-fire ATGMs, aircraft, and maybe, if you're close enough, SPAGs. Now if you want to get close and try to use rockets or whatever, there's another issue is top tier SPAGs, the SPAGs that you'll be running into, all have radar guidance. Now I think it would be understandable for you guys to change a few things with how radar guidance works. For things flying too low, it makes sense for that not to appear on radar, which could help helicopters out a whole lot. But I don't think it would entirely change anything. As you see a helicopter, they're pretty easy to shoot down. I shot down one with 50 cows from the roof of my M1, and it didn't take much concentrated fire to bring that bird down. So helicopters are going to rely on the snipe from miles away strategy. One thing to note about helicopters is that they have their own runway or air pad or whatever to rearm and repair. And this runway is much closer than the actual runway. And I tested it out and it does indeed work on planes, not just helicopters. And it gives you an air spawn. Now this runway, if you even want to call it that, it's really short. It's definitely not designed for planes to land on. But if you get in slow enough, you can easily land there, especially on things like the Kika. And then you get an air spawn and you still have your takeoff boosters. It could lead to some pretty mean strategies. But the helipads also don't have any anti-air, so they're completely open to planes just camping the spawn. At least they won't be killing tanks, I guess. Anyways, let's get on to the helicopters themselves, finally. The US and Russia each get 6 helicopters. The US get the AHG-1 at 8.0. This is the only bird that I'm actually interested in, as I don't actually have any 9.0 tanks, so even if I had these, they wouldn't be any use to me outside of the helicopter mode. Oh yeah, there's a helicopter mode. But this thing also gets the option to change out its frontal miniguns with grenade launchers that at 90 degrees can penetrate 70-something millimeters of armor. And I think at 60 degrees it can penetrate about 20, leading this thing to be quite deadly if you're able to fly over enemy tanks, but anything with a roof-mounted machine gun would probably be able to take you down. After that is the UH-1B and UH-1C, and the Hueys, I gotta say, are really cool. The UH-1B can carry miniguns or ATGMs, and these ATGMs are not tow missiles, they're an older style. They're on these racks spreading out and they look super cool. UH-1C is the one that you've seen in all the Gamescom footage with the 6 tow missiles on the sides, and the UH-1C XM30 is just the UH-1C with XM30 30mm gun pods. It's the premium. After that is the AH-1F Cobra. It can carry up to 8 tow missiles and a good amount of other ordnance, and it's a really cool helicopter. And coming in at 10.0 is the AH-1Z, which I think is the coolest helicopter of this patch. I don't know why, it just looks awesome. It has a hefty amount of ordnance, including 16 tow 2 ATGMs, which have 900 millimeters of penetration at 90 degrees, which I gotta say is a lot. On the Russian side of things, the first helicopter in the line is the Mi-4AV, which is one of the silliest looking things I've seen. It's at 9.0 and can carry 4 ATGMs, though the ATGMs are quite slow and don't pack much of a punch, with only having 650 millimeters of penetration at 0 degrees. After that is the first Hind, the Mi-24A, the old school one with the greenhouse on the front. And while I think it's the coolest of the Russian helicopters coming out this patch, its armament left a lot to be desired, as it was obviously lacking behind the other Hinds. There were 3 other M24s, the V, the P, which had 2 30mm autocannons on the side of its fuselage in a fixed position, and the D, which was the premium. They all shared the same armaments, at least from what I could gather, as it was quite hard to grasp what you were selecting. There was a big old jumble of everything. The options on these helicopters is vast, and it calls for Gaijin to readjust the way they have you select loadouts, as it could get rather annoying and confusing. The final hind on this was the Mi-35M, a modern helicopter able to carry 16 ATGMs, along with rockets or bombs, while being very modern and cool and having a 23mm cannon in the front. It looked a little bit odd, as it was the only hind that couldn't take its landing gear in. It was supposed to be a modern one, but that's really just a nitpick. Of all the helicopters being added, I hope that Gaijin decides to add some earlier helicopters, not entirely just so I can play them, but because some of the older ones do look pretty cool, although that's rather limited to only America having them. Now, with my estimation of helicopters, I think if you're going to buy one, it's best to go with the Hind D, as it just looks like the better helicopter, although the Huey is much more iconic. But really, the premium Huey is no different than the regular Tree 1C, except for it has the option to take out the XM30 gun pods. But really, if you're expecting anything super realistic from these helicopters, I would tell you to lower your expectations, as the YouTuber Mags TV pointed out that these vehicles, they don't fly like helicopters do. Now, his estimation was taken from the first dev server, and in the second dev server, their flight models were definitely changed and much harder to land. So I guess I will have to wait for his estimation to see if they change it enough for final release. I'm no aeronautic engineer, so I can't say much. They are fun to fly, but I don't think they're going to be useful. Maybe that helicopter mode will be pretty fun though. For those who didn't buy a helicopter pack, the tanks are the most sought after part of this patch. For the US, they're getting a whole new Abrams, the M1IP, which is supposed to be an Abrams with improved protection. But oddly enough, in-game it seems to have worse protection and is heavier, and making it all throughout worse. So this is the dev server, so we'd have to wait till the live server to really make criticisms. But really, it's just another Abrams. So now you got 2 Abrams, which is great for people who love Abrams. Now with backups, you could have 4 Abrams in one match. Although if you burn through 4 Abrams, I think your team sucks. The other tanks they're getting is the T-54 E1 as a rank 5 premium that you can buy with Eagles. From the outside, this tank looks rather mundane. It's an 8.0, it has no composite armor, and generally its armor itself isn't even that impressive for 8.0. There's no stabilizer thanks to the oscillating turret. There is an autoloader, but the real special bit of this tank is in the ammo. Its AP shell can punch through at 10 meters, at 0 degrees, 300 millimeters of armor, which is impressive for an AP shell. But what I am drawn to is its APDS shell, which has a velocity of 1,554 meters per second, which makes it a damn fast shell. This tank would be ideal for sniping from long distances, as its unimpressive armor and lack of stabilizer really puts it at a disadvantage. The final US tank is the Spag that they got, the M247. The thing's been covered to death, so I won't drag over it more, but hey, the proximity shells are really cool. Russia got 3 new tanks as well, the well-known and loved T-80B, and as cool as this thing is, it unfortunately still holds the same weak points as all the other top-tier Russian vehicles, as all their designs are the same. Just shoot the lower front plate, shoot right next to the gun barrel, or shoot the driver hatch and you got a kill. I feel despite this addition and the helicopters, Russia is still going to be lagging behind the rest of the nations at top tier. The other tank that they got, the premium T-55AM, had its battle rating reduced because it sucks so much to 8.7. The regular T-55 got its battle rating reduced to 8.3. The vehicle still suffers from what all other top tier Russian vehicles suffer from, though I believe this one has additional armor over the driver's hatch and lower plate. You can still shoot right next to the gun barrel and only have to go through solid steel, no composite armor. And the slower speed thanks to the additional armor isn't helping either. The one Russian vehicle that I am very much looking forward to and have a lot of praise to say for is the BMP-2, armed with a 30mm autocannon that has a very high rate of fire and 100mm of penetration with APDS. Aimed to be 7.7, this vehicle possibly could be one of my favorites of this patch. It has a log spoiler, it's a float tank, and it fires ATGMs, and you don't need to upgrade it to get the mouse tracking ATGM. Although it only has 4, it's still a rather fast tank with a low profile. It also has the ability to upgrade it to put high hardness armored plates on the side, protect it against 50 cals, although it gains a whole lot of weight and loses ability to swim, so I'm not sure if it's totally worth it, but it's nice to have the option. Germany got 3 new tanks. The 2 that we knew were coming was the TAM, which by the way can be hull broken. It's essentially a light Leopard with less armor, same gun. The Leo L44, which is a premium that is essentially a better Leo A1A1 at the same battle rating. In the first dev server, it had a 6-second reload, which was ludicrous. It was changed to match the Tree A1A1 in the second dev server. It's still altogether a better tank with higher penetration and a thicker round. I don't like the concept of this tank being sold, at least where it is. My proposal, perhaps the Leo A1A1 should have its battle rating lowered. And yes, it's stabilized. I got to play it when it had its 6-second reload, and man, that was really overpowered. Although all tanks were kind of mashed into the same battle rating, which made grinding some lower tier things is kind of annoying. The British are unfortunately only getting 1 tank, though that tank is rather cool, the Warrior. Armed with 8 ATGMs and a pretty slow firing 30mm autocannon, coming in at 8.0. It also has the ability to have composite side skirts, so that's not really going to stop any legit tank from murdering you. If you think about it for a second, I'm not so sure this thing should be at 8.0. As we saw with the BMP2 at 7.7, it has a much faster firing gun than the Warrior. And while it does have less ATGMs with less penetration, I'm not so sure if 2 more ATGMs with a little bit more penetration were really worth the 0.3 battle rating increase, especially with this horrendously slower firing cannon. The French got the Bat Chat, and there's a good chance you already know everything about the Bat Chat. There'll be a video in the corner talking all about it. And finally, something that I wasn't expecting, Japan didn't get any new tanks, but finally, the STA-1 and STA-2 had their turrets resized to be more realistic. Now, I hear that the STA-2's turret is still incorrect, but don't quote me on that. They also had the armor redone, and now they are much better. The turret being now 75mm instead of the 40 that they used to be, so you shouldn't be dying to bow forces frontally anymore. Although technically the turret resize is a nerf because now they are bigger targets. If only Gaijin could fix the rest of the Japanese tanks. While we're on the subject of the tanks, the leak list that popped up a few weeks ago, not all the tanks on that showed up. And see here, my theory is that this leak list isn't just for tanks that are to be in this patch, but just tanks in general that were to be added in the future. It's also possible that there are still more things to be added this patch. Gaijin just hasn't added them all to the dev server yet, as I have the feeling that there will be another dev server before this patch goes live. In the past, they have done that before. I believe when French tanks were added, the first dev server there was missing quite a few tanks that showed up in a later dev server. There is quite a lot of evidence that the Bradley is coming, and that was on the leak list, so it's possible that thing is still planned to show up. Also on the subject of tanks, partially through the week, Gaijin's Twitter had tweeted out some images that they took when they were at a American military museum, and the images they took were of a Bradley, a attack helicopter, and the turret of a M60. This has got some people to theorize that they're finally going to fix the M60's mantlet. I personally don't have my hopes that high. As later shown on the VK blogs, they really just took pictures of a whole lot of random American vehicles. Another crazy change that happened to ground vehicles was the respawn cost of all ground vehicles had been cut in half, and the respawn of reserve vehicles has been removed altogether. Although on the other hand, the amount of spawn points you gained had been reduced by 30%. Now, overall, I think this is a good change. It could lead to longer matches as you don't need to get as many points to respawn, but I'm not so sure about the thing about reserve vehicles not having a respawn cost altogether, as this would influence people to jump into a BT5 and rush to a cap zone to try to get enough points to spawn into a plane or something of the sort. On the subject of planes, don't worry my dear pilots, you're not completely left in the dust, as you get 2 new ones. Woo! The ME-163B0, which is a ME-163 with 4 20mm cannons. 2 of the cannons are in gun pods, and it seems that nobody has ever actually heard of this ME-163 having gun pods. And the only proof that it ever did is this drawing of it. Hopefully Gaijin could supply us a photo of this aircraft with these gun pods. Otherwise, this is a very strange choice for them. The other plane added is the I-225 for the USSR, and it doesn't fly straight. It leans to the left for some reason. I would like to talk about it more, but it's obvious the flight model is borked, so we'll have to wait till either full release or the next dev server to really see what that thing could do. Along with those planes, the Lag 3, the Wyvern, and the ME-410 had their flight models changed. There's a few other changes, but they're rather minor. Now that would just be about it, but I got a little conspiracy theory to throw around. You know the FJ4 Fury that came from the recent summer event? It's essentially the regular FJ4 Fury, but with a different camo and the ability to carry the AGMs. Now, just any old FJ4 should be able to carry these AGMs, but this one belongs to Marines Fighter Attack Squadron 232, and their tail code is WT. Now, when I see WT, I immediately think of War Thunder, and it seems Gaijin had deliberately decided to choose the 6th plane of this squadron. Now, what I'm saying here is this is hinting towards something in the future. Now, it could have to do with War Thunder's 6th anniversary coming up. It could possibly have to do with Rank 6 jets, as this is a jet, and it does have the very first guided missiles. But that's all speculation. Now, there's a whole lot of weird stuff going on with ships, as on the dev server, you could view the first reserve vehicle for the British fleet, and in Datamines, people found the entire British fleet modeled. And on the mode choosing drop-down menu, there was an option to select naval battles, either realistic or arcade. And this led everybody to believe that the British fleet and possibly OBT were to be released when this patch drops. But the StoreTeam Dude on the Naval Closed Beta forums pointed out that there will be no new nations until Open Beta, and that Open Beta is planned till the end of this year, or in about 3-ish months. Now, the StoreTeam Dude in the past has been wrong, and I don't know, it's hard to go with him, but he's not often wrong. And Gaijin has had various vehicles in data files for years before, so it wouldn't be surprising if they kept the British fleet in there for a few months. Also, people found in the files of the game large naval cannons for various vessels yet to be seen. Ones that struck my interest were the 150mm L55 cannons that were used as secondaries on the Deutschland and Bismarck class ships, and the 203mm SKC-43 cannons that were used on the Admiral Hepser Prince Eugene class ships, and the 380mm L48 cannons that were used on the Bismarck. There's quite a few other cannons, but of smaller calibers, used on multiple different ships. Now, there's a lot of strange things in the files of War Thunder, so I'm not going to jump to any conclusions, but it points a direction that perhaps Gaijin is planning on battleships. And more down-to-earth news of naval forces, there's a large change in the way leaking is managed. Now, breaches from below the waterline are much more significant, and depending on the breach size and vessel speed, the vessel can accumulate water on a much more rapid scale. Modules that are in flooded sections will receive damage and eventually become completely disabled. And now breaches on smaller vessels will not exceed 1 minute, but on larger vessels it still may be the case. There's lots of other minor changes to ships, but for all the minor things that I'm not covering, there will be links in the description to unofficial and preliminary patch notes for you to read up on. I suggest you do so. But this is the end of the video. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you didn't, don't hit the like button. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. I make these new videos every weekend, and I make random videos through the week. If you want to be notified anytime I upload anything, hit that bell icon to get a notification. And thanks for watching and have a great day. Oh yeah, Discord.